I'm scared. I can really empathize with people who spend their entire career at a corporate job that they hate, just showing up to that cubicle day after day after day, because the alternative is also really, really scary. Being willing to sit in not knowing what you're doing is really painful, and it's scary. And this is not the first time in my career that I've done it, and I'm proud of myself for being willing to consistently reevaluate and change my mind and want to find something else. But every time it's terrifying. I'm always gravitating towards YouTube videos of people who already have it figured out, like podcasts of so-and-so in such and such successful career. And I actually don't think that that's helping me. That's making me feel worse. It's making me feel like there are so many people that already have it figured out. And it's also making me think that like luck plays an enormous role in it, and how can I account for luck? So I thought that I would make some videos of myself like truly struggling through it. In the event that there's other people out there in a similar situation, which I imagine that there are, looking to people who already have it figured out might not help you through the trenches of the not knowing what the fuck you're doing. All I keep thinking is, what am I gonna do? I don't know what I'm doing. 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 And I think that that is undermining what I have already done. So what have I done? Even right now, I'm resisting the urge to criticize myself for not having done enough. But what I have done so far is tried to start reaching out to people and reading books and therapy and self-reflection. So I'm going to share some of the things that I've been doing with nothing but a hope and a dream. So therapy, I think that that's really important to individuate, to start to recognize what you really want out of life, professionally and otherwise, without the pain of the shoulds, what I should be doing, what so-and-so thinks I should be doing, what my parents expect of me, what society expects of me. Getting rid of all of that noise to focus in on what you actually want and need is important. And for me, that has come from therapy. So therapy, books, both fiction and nonfiction. I'm an avid reader, so I don't even know if I should count this on my list because I've been doing this regardless. I have read one specific book that I recommend. The last time I had a career transition, I drowned myself in self-help books, and I actually found it was not helpful. It made the should do louder and made me fall away from what instinctually I might actually want. So I don't recommend drowning yourself in self-help books. But there is one self-help book that I read recently that actually really felt productive. It's called Becoming You by Suzy Welch. She is a professor at NYU Business School. And what makes her book so useful is that she breaks it down into actionable components. So I'll summarize it briefly for you. So thinks that in order to find your dream job, for lack of a better word, or at least to start working towards your dream job, you need to evaluate three things: your values, your aptitudes, and your economically viable interests. She splits those into three sections in her book. The first one on values is actually the longest section, and I think one of the most surprising and rewarding. If I'm not mistaken, it was the source of her PhD research. She categorizes 16 distinct values, which she defines in her book, and then helps you evaluate how you personally prioritize those 16 values. I made a little PowerPoint presentation. She's really clear about not moralizing your values. She uses family centrism, I think, as an example. You might want to be the kind of person that thinks that putting your family first is your number one priority in life, and that your career actually needs to be built around that idea. But if in reality that isn't your driving value, then you could be making a lot of professional sacrifices to keep your family in the same neighborhood. You're not willing to move, blah, blah, blah. And that could be a source of your unhappiness. So confronting what you think you should want as your values versus what are actually your values is a really tough exercise. And it was really intimidating. Like going through, I ended up kind of reading and rereading that section more than once, and then talking to my husband about how I ranked certain ones and seeing if in his perspective I was being honest with myself, because I think we can want to be a way that we maybe aren't. That she addresses that your values can shift over time. So for example, if you have a baby, you may not have scored family centrism that high as a value, but then the moment you have a baby, family centrism becomes critical, and you're kind of moving your values around, and so you have to be flexible with yourself and your career accordingly. I found it a really tough section to wrestle with, but I'm glad that I did. One of the things that I discovered, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but one of the things I discovered is I rank beholderism, which I kind of would rather use the word aesthetics. Like I rank how something looks incredibly highly, which makes sense. Like all of my favorite movies, the recurring theme throughout them is how beautifully shot they are. A single scene is like a painting. I can spend all day long crafting a PowerPoint so that it looks like visually balanced and engaging, and I don't think that that is something that everyone would enjoy. So I was surprised to find how something looks like artistically is just, ooh, it's everything. I love it so much. So once I had determined what my values are for right now, in terms of like what I want in a job. So for example, I care a lot how things look, the beholderism. I care a lot about having agency. I like being able to control my own day and my own time. And voice, like I really care about being authentic at work, and I want to work in a space that is comfortable with me being myself, which is rarer than one might think. So once I learned that those things, amongst others, were really important to me in my next job, I went through and reflected what were the values that were satisfied by my past jobs, to kind of visually show myself why they didn't work, why they weren't scratching an itch, because they were supporting some values. Maybe they were supporting achievement, like it had the job had a nice name, my job title was fancy. They supported affluence, like they paid me well. So they were supporting values, they just weren't values that were motivating to me personally. Doing that kind of allowed me to, I don't know, have a little bit of grace with my past self, in recognizing that the career decisions I made in the past were not mistakes. They were just a misalignment of my values. The next section, it gets simpler from here, fortunately. The next section on aptitude, she has you take a bunch of Enneagram type tests, which I'm always a little bit wary of. They make me feel like they're like star sign tests, which I'm also a little bit wary of. Nonetheless, we're just kind of gathering data to make better decisions. So I took some fancy Enneagram tests that she recommended and learned some things about myself, which actually aligned a lot with my values. I learned that I'm an individualist. I want life to be a work of art. Like that matters a lot to me, which aligns with the aesthetic piece. I'm pretty enthusiastic and passionate about what I'm engaged in. I'm also a little bit of an achiever and a helper. So in my childhood, it was reinforced that my values come in accomplishments. So that achiever thing is really a little bit of a compulsion. And I'd like to kind of move more towards creative thinking and caring less about that achievement element. But anyway, all this is a work in progress. And I think an Enneagram is maybe a little bit less malleable than your values. Like I think a lot of them are quite core to who you are, but that's not to say that you can't evolve with time. So all of these are just opportunities to gather data about yourself. They're not like permanent accusations of who you are. Okay, so then once you have your values and your aptitudes, like the things that you're good at, like one of the aptitudes, which I don't have, is like something having to do with numbers, being able to spot errors really fast, things like that. That isn't really me. So you kind of get a sense of what you're good and what you're not good at. So once you have the values and the aptitudes, then you start looking into your economically viable interests. And this requires action. This requires research, like based on what you discovered about your values, what you discovered about your skills. What are some industries you would like to work in? And then going on the internet, she gives you some resources and finding what kind of jobs exist in those industries that you might not have thought of before, so that you can start forming an action plan of getting yourself into the core center in that Venn diagram of economically viable interests, values, and aptitudes. This one I still haven't finished in terms of tasks. Like this one, I kind of feel the first two parts were so emotionally draining to me that I felt like by the time I got to economically viable interests, I had lost hope. I felt like, well, great. What I learned is that I probably want to work in fashion, and I can't get a job in fashion, certainly not without leaving San Diego. So I just read a whole book to discover I can't, what? That being said, she did a couple of other things that were helpful throughout the book. One, she asked you to evaluate whose life you would want. So like look out there in the world and list as many people as you can, like whose life would you want? What do you like about their life? And then also what do you maybe not want about their life, as a way of reminding yourself that nothing's perfect. Well, I got a real flick going on here. When I did a list of whose life do you want, and then I started really evaluating, like breaking down what about their life I wanted, it did lead to some action. It made the idea real. It's like people in the world have done this. And it's hard, but it's conceivable. So anyway, I'm still at the economically viable interest thing. In pursuit of that, I reached out to some people. By some people, I mean 2 people. So far, I've only reached out to 2 people. One was someone who I know just quit her job. So I was really I was reaching out to her to commiserate, to learn, to empathize. She's not in an industry that I want to be in. She's actually 10 years older than me, totally a different point in her life than I am. But it's really nice to compare notes with someone going out on a limb so that you don't feel so alone. Even if their version of going out on a limb looks really different to yours. I found that conversation really helpful, like so helpful I almost cried afterwards. So that. I also reached out to a brand that I would love to work for. They responded, which is amazing, but they responded saying, we have no jobs, so that didn't really go anywhere. And now, all I keep saying to myself is, you don't even, like, what do you do now? 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 And I'm coming up with black, like, no idea. An effort to be honest with myself. I'm gonna try to come up with 3 tasks that I can do this week that are small steps. I don't even know if they're steps forward, but they're movement. So, step 1, I'm gonna try to find another brand to reach out to that I could see myself working at. I don't know what that's gonna be, but I will try to think of one. So, 1, research, new company. You may ask, Haley, why aren't you just going on LinkedIn? I don't want a job that I could find on LinkedIn. I want to work at a smaller company. I want to work at kind of a niche company. I don't want a corporate job. And like, I need to kind of be a little bit more creative about how I search for this job because I want the job to be a little bit more creative. Also, LinkedIn is where my soul goes to die. Okay, I think I will research video editing courses, hopefully free ones, because I like building PowerPoints, I like building visuals, I like building graphics that are very simple because I'm not necessarily an expert. And I wonder if I might like editing because there's a lot of visual cohesion that is required there. So I'll do that. Okay, research video editing class. Okay, and the last thing is I am gonna go on Reddit and I'm gonna try to find other people who have read Becoming You by Suzy Welch and see if there's like a community there of people who have gone through the process and found a job that they like and learn where they looked and who they spoke to and how it went. I also think it'd be really interesting to meet more people whose values ranking were similar to mine to learn what they do for a living. I think that could be interesting. Okay, so Reddit, Suzy Welch, community. Okay, so I have my 3 tasks for today. And while I don't think any one of these are gonna skyrocket me to my future, it's better than nothing? Question mark? If anyone is in a similar situation, please join me in my efforts. I'm in need of allies.